A conference report. Okay, I see a couple things, and one of them is that you're ruminating about how deceived our will can be about certainty, the fact that it's deciding something. I endorse all of those examples. When I was very young, and ever since then, I've many times witnessed people playing video games in demo mode, thinking they were controlling it. And I was thinking if I was a researcher, I would research that, because that's very interesting to me. Because the point is to have a free will, and those times when you could prove your will wasn't really free, like in mentalist tricks, it's very good to master. And to me, that's just like mastering optical illusions. I don't say just because I see a face, no, I see a vase. Oh, wait, and then I find out that they were both illusion, and there's neither face nor a vase really there. I don't think that that means that every time I see a face, there's nothing at all there. It does mean that, wait a second, I might not be seeing what I think, and there's always, to me, so far, cognitive unification in these things. What is in common between a tracing of a face and an actual face? There's certain features and elements. They're like complex geometric elements that our brain seems to understand, different kinds of lines and points and shapes, that it makes the similarity and calls them the same. So what is the face really is an idea of a face. So I find out that these things are ideas, but I don't say that that the fact that you can have an optical illusion means that nothing at all is real. It means that nothing is quite as it seems. It tells you that things aren't quite as they seem. But then you can get a new appearance, a new seeming. So seemings seem to have to do with shapes. We can be fooled about this so-called external reality, and this is why I base all of this stuff, all of the skepticism is based on this idea of will and vice versa. And I don't think that just because we have optical illusions that while that means we doubt everything, it doesn't mean we've proved everything is an illusion, or in what sense it could be understood so that no longer would it have to be interpreted as illusion. As a skeptic, I think when you interpret something as externally real, that's an illusion, that feeling of externality. But I can always tell you, well, the reinterpretation of that is that you're getting perceptions, you're getting consistent perceptions of something, and you've created a model that relates to those consistent perceptions. And in that sense, if you know that's what you're doing, well, that's not an illusion, that really is what's going on. But I just wonder things like, what is the purpose of thinking there's the illusion of will and things like this that I brought up, because I can't see of a way to define purpose without will. But here's another thing, what is the value of being free in the sense of not being what we would call a slave? What is the value of that? You can say, oh, well, you'll have less suffering. Well, not necessarily, first of all. Second of all, even if we assume that you have less suffering, so what? Either the suffering's going to stop or the suffering's going to, in what sense, if I could easily free a person, let's say I have the right to free someone, as I live in a state with slaves and I'm elected to be able to free all the slaves, either their suffering is going to stop or it's not going to stop. And my decision to stop it or not is going to be it's going to happen whichever way it's going to happen. So in what way can I not use my illusion of will? I have no responsibility. I'm not really using it. So if my will says, oh, it doesn't matter, keep them slaves, think of all the pleasure it creates on the people that are owning the slaves and all the wealth they get to spend. To me that's reprehensible, but I don't see how without a theory of will I can have a genuine theory of freedom. Because look, you have material ideas of freedom. Like let's say there's a steel ball on a floor, a curved floor. And then there's another steel ball on the same curved floor, but it's attached to a post in the floor by a chain. Well, the steel ball is free in the sense that it has less restrictions on its movement, but that only is with respect to a will that wants to move it. Because as an unfree thing, as a material thing, the unchained ball is no more free. It's 100% going to move based on its environment, and the one with the chain is 100%. They're both 100% determined. So they're without the idea of a will that can change what happens by default, you don't really have a concept of freedom even in a material sense. So that's what I would like to know, because I think you live with the theory of freedom. I think you want there to be political freedoms and freedom of speech and things like this, and I don't see of a way to define that in your system. I'm all for multiple systems could be apt. If you have two systems, like let's say you have a radial coordinate system and a Cartesian coordinate system, they're both apt. You can't say, well, one or the other, because they're both kind of complete. They can all define everything they need in order to express themselves in the domain to which they apply. But you have a domain that definitely involves this concept of freedom, I would think. I'm trying to not assume it, but I have trouble. I think I have to assume it. And no way to define that stuff, so it's incomplete. And so that's different. That's if you have a system that is self-contradictory or can't complete its own definitions, then there's a problem there. And if it needs a system contrary to itself in order to complete the model as you live it, in other words, you need another way to act like there's a free will. And you lose the ability to say that other people are even responsible for their will, because things are just happening. So, yeah, it does come back to an argument of, who has a better influence, but you can't even ask better, or you can't compare. There's only one thing that's going to happen. There's no comparing two things. There's not any duplicity of potentials. If you do this, it will be this way, and if you do that, and so you should have free will because it won't matter, because no matter what you do, the result was going to happen. That's what's going to happen. It's going to happen. So you don't get to compare events and choose which to do. And I don't see how you really even have natural language. I mean, I think almost every sentence, well, really, because I'm a skeptic, I think, and I believe in embodied mind, every sentence invokes the will, because it's from your will, from the perspective that your will shares. But even besides that, I mean, I just think even if you took some statements as just descriptive statements about something besides the will, fine. But most of human language, you're going to find terms like purpose and freedom and all of these that require some idea of choice. Now, how we experience will is an illusion. How we experience vision is an illusion. Okay? When you think the sun is moving through the sky over the day, that's an illusion. Okay, but that can all be rectified. How can you rectify the illusion of will? To what can you rectify it if it doesn't involve some sort of choice? See, because again, I can see how if you had a little teeny tiny percent of willpower and a lot of determinism on you, I could see how we would evolve an illusion that we had a lot of willpower and only a little bit of determinism, because that would keep that animal motivated, right, to keep acting on what it believed. It would not be paralyzed with spending time in consideration. So I see that. But if there's no will at all, then there is no advantage, because there's no such thing as an advantage. An advantage means if you have this property, something different will happen. But in a system where just one set of things happens no matter what, and there is no influence of will, there is no influence of choice, there's no multiple potentialities, there's all the potentialities that don't come to be, they're not real. Just the one that came to be was the real potential. So, and with quantum mechanics, we know it becomes built into the physical world. Those potentialities are material. They exist in some sense. Perhaps they even happen and we just can't experience them. Or perhaps they don't happen, but they still materially exist and influence what does happen. They partake as a side effect, as one of the contributing factors, rather, of whatever does happen. And either way, they have a material in the quantum, just about any interpretation of quantum mechanics, they have some sort of material reality as potentials. But in a simple consequent world, the only potential is the one that happened. And you can't talk about any of this stuff without a concept of will. And I don't understand the compatibilist concept of will. Some people have said to me, well, you develop will because, as a survival thing. Because I don't see how that would happen. Either if will has an influence, then having one would help you survive, because you could use that influence to survive. But if you don't have a will, then thinking you have one isn't going to make that will have a greater influence on your survival. It can't. It doesn't have an impact. You just happen to survive or not. So, I think it's interesting, all the illusions of will that we could find out, but we should also think about, where we do make progress in our will, and the fact that, okay, things aren't random. One way to tell if there's a living thing involved is that it's not random. If everything in your house is all moved around in this random way, probably an earthquake. One thing was moved across, that's not really a very likely random event. It's not just a Brownian motion kind of event. It might make you think that some sentient creature, or conscious creature, at least a living creature, has moved it. So, and that's because we could tell the difference between the influence of will and just the inherent